Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Gary Crawford, and I am the Chair of the Budget Committee. The clerk has confirmed that we have quorum, and I'd like to call the meeting 19 to order and welcome everyone here to, I think, the first day of lockdown number 2, and I'm hoping everybody's going to be incredibly safe and we'll get through this second lockdown safely over the next number of weeks. Today's meeting is being held by video conference. City staff are also connecting to the meeting by video conference. As City Hall remains closed, the public will continue to participate electronically and can watch the meeting streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. The clerk staff have connected all registered speakers to the meeting by audio. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting Budget Committee's page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. I ask for everyone's patience as if we experience any delays or technical problems during the meeting. Members, this is a paperless meeting. The City Clerk has provided all agenda materials via CMP, which is the Clerk's meeting portal. Clerk's IT staff will be available to you remotely if you need any help with any of your devices. I'd also like to remind staff to keep their mics muted and the videos turned off unless you need to answer any questions or speak to the committee. This will make it easier for me as chair and for those watching you on YouTube to observe members as they participate in the debate and the vote items. Members, please keep your mic muted unless you wish to question staff or speak to an item, and ensure that your video is turned on. As part of each agenda item, I will ask members to raise their hand or unmute their mic if they wish to speak or ask questions of staff. I will then create a speakers list and will call on members when it's their turn to speak as per normal process. When voting on an item or a motion, I ask that members ensure that they keep the video on and to raise their hand to indicate their vote. Members, I want to remind you that you must still submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at buc@toronto.ca to help you with your motions. If there's any briefing note requests, we generally don't have them at this meeting. I know Councillor Layton has had a few motions in the past, so if you have any briefing note requests, get them into the clerks and we'll approve them at the end of the meeting. These briefing note requests or any motions will go off to executive. If there are any visiting members of council attending the meeting today, I encourage you to turn on your video so that I know that you are present and can give you the opportunity to ask questions of staff or speak. This will also assist the clerk staff to record attendance for the meeting. Although we are in different locations and meeting remotely today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand and unmute your mic. Seeing none, we will proceed. First of all, can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of our regular meeting on October 8th, 2020, as well as the minutes of our special meeting to the launch of the rate-supported budgets on November 6th? Councillor Bradford will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Members, we have 10 items on the agenda for today's meeting, and we'll also have members of the public who are registered to speak today, I believe, on 2 of the items. So we'll do a rundown of the agenda, and then we'll go back to any items that are held or deputations. We'll start with BU 19.1, the 2021 rate-supported budget, 2021 wastewater and water consumption rates and service fees. There are no deputations to this particular item. Do any of my members want to hold this item?
Yes, I hold, please.
Okay. Councillor Leighton will hold that. BU 20.21 rate supported budget, solid waste management services, and recommended 2021 solid waste rates and fees. There is a speaker registered to that, so I will hold that in my name. BU 19.3 2021 rate supported budgets, Toronto Parking Authority. There is a registered speaker, and I will hold that in my name. BU 19.4 municipal land transfer tax rebate for first-time home buyers. There is a staff report on this. Would anybody like to hold this item? Councillor Carroll?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hold it, thanks.
Okay, no problem. We'll hold that. Councillor Carroll? Okay, BU 19.5, project cost adjustments and deferrals, accelerations to the Parks, Forestry and Recreation 2020 capital budget and 2021 to 29 capital plan. There are no deputations. There's a recommendation before us. Would anybody like to hold this? Councillor McKelvey, did you want to move this?
It's so moved.
Okay. All in favor? All in favor? There we go. Opposed? That's carried. BU 19.6, capital variance report for the 12 months ending December 31st, 2019. Anybody like to hold that?
Hold, please.
Councillor Layton will hold that. BU 19.7, operating variance report for the year ending December 31st, 2019.
I can hold that too, please.
Councillor Leighton, sure. BU 19.8, capital variance report for the 9 months ending September 30th, 2020. Somebody like to move that? Councillor Bradford will move. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 19.9, operating variance for the 9 months ending September 30th, 2020.
Hold that, Mr. Chair.
Can you hold that? Sure.
And Mr. Chair, the item on MLTT, I can release that now. There's just a little piece I was finishing reading.
I'd like to hold that then, Mr. Chair, if possible.
Okay, sure. Yep. Okay, so we're holding item BU 19.9, BU 19.10, obligatory reserve funds, deferred revenues, reserves, and council-directed reserve funds report September 30th, 2020. Councillor Nunziata, do you want to move that? Great, thanks. All in favor? Opposed?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, that's the one I just asked if we could hold.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was the one before.
Hold it and then I released the MLTT.
Oh, okay. I apologize. So we're holding that in your name. No problem. Thanks.
Sorry, thanks.
That's okay. So you're holding 19.10, the obligatory reserve funds? Okay, and you're also holding the operating variance for 9 months, the one before that.
Oh, no, I'm not. Sorry, I guess I got ahead of you. I just need to hold the reserve funds item.
Okay.
I can leave the 9-month reserve variance.
Okay, so why don't we go back to 19.9, which is the operating variance report for 9 months ending September 30th. Does anybody else want to hold that? If not, if somebody can move.
I can move that.
Okay, Councillor Carroll will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, that is, I believe, it. Okay, so why don't we work our way back to the beginning. We do have 2 items with deputations. Do we want to move with the deputations first? Is it okay if we go to the 2 items that have deputations first, and then we'll go back and finish the agenda? Just want to make sure we get the deputants in as quickly as we can. So there's 2 items, 19.2 and 19.3, that have deputations. So why don't we go to 19.2, the 2021 rate-supported budget, solid waste management services, and recommended 2021 solid waste rates and fees. We have Emily Alfred from the Toronto Environmental Alliance, who is on. Emily, welcome. You have 5 minutes to speak to us.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello? Okay, great, thank you. Sorry. Good morning, councillors and staff. Thank you for listening to me this morning. My name is Emily Alfred. I'm the waste campaigner at the Toronto Environmental Alliance, or T. We have more than 60,000 supporters across Toronto who want to build a greener city for all. We believe that solid waste management is an important environmental service of the city. Achieving our waste reduction targets and creating a circular economy in Toronto that sees resources conserved and cycled into new materials will not only cut costs, but achieve important community goals. Managing resources and waste wisely is essential to addressing the climate crisis. We need to be a resilient city with sustainable and wise use of resources. Today, I'm here to urge this committee to increase and enhance the waste education budget for Toronto Waste customers, not reduce it. The proposed 2021 budget includes eliminating printed calendars. While this may seem like a quick solution that saves money and eliminates paper use, we believe it will actually result in higher waste costs and more contamination of waste streams. Waste communications and education is a crucial part of moving our city towards zero waste. Ensuring that all waste customers have quick and easy access to information is key to reducing contamination. Education is important because recycling and packaging is frankly quite confusing. At T, we spend a lot of time talking to members of the public and the media about waste. We also talk to residents and staff in multi-residential buildings across the city. We hear that the average person faces a lot of conflicting messages about how to sort waste. One reason is that every municipality has different recycling rules, and within Toronto, away from home, at a shopping mall, office, or restaurant, or in the 1/3 of apartments and condo buildings that have private waste collection, recycling rules are different. This is very confusing to the average person, and it contributes to contamination and mistakes in sorting. Printed signs and waste calendars are valuable. Not everyone has access to computers and high-speed internet to search for waste information. Some people don't have computers at home and use the internet at the library or in public spaces, or they may have one shared computer in their household that's very busy. The calendar has a lot of information on topics that customers may not actively seek out as they think they have the right information. For example, how to set out yard waste, or that the city collects cooking oil for recycling. The calendar serves as a helpful reference guide. The average person may get a notice in the mail, see an ad online or on the TTC or in the newspaper. That doesn't mean they'll remember the details. Repetition is an important part of communication, and a calendar serves as a reference guide that can give the details to back up and complement those other communication methods throughout the year. We've also seen that official City of Toronto branded printed resources are very important to counteract confusing information put out by companies or on the internet. For example, well-meaning but inaccurate Facebook posts or websites that tell people how to recycle, or misleading product labels when companies claim that their products are flushable or compostable or recyclable, when in fact that isn't the case in Toronto. Behavioral science shows that even the smallest barriers or extra steps can impact behavior. Instead of checking a calendar or poster, if someone had to go to a computer, navigate to a website, and type in a product or material type, that extra few minutes could be enough to discourage them to not bother. For the last 3 years, T has been working with and leading a joint research project with researchers at U of T on high-rise communities in Toronto. In our resident surveys and observations, we've seen that high-performing buildings made extensive use of printed resources such as signs, calendars, and other stickers and labels provided by the city. We surveyed residents in about a dozen buildings and asked them to indicate the places they go to get information. Waste calendars and signs were the top 2 sources of information for those residents. The city website was the 3rd most selected resource. But when you look at the age groups, you can see differences in how households find information. For those over 70, the use of the website drops to just 15% of respondents, and printed resources increases. Younger demographics and those under 30 reported that they looked to calendars and signs, but were more likely to go online for information. However, this group was more likely to search on the internet, not the city website, when they found information, showing that they would probably get inaccurate details. This is just a small survey of about 1,000 households conducted in English. It isn't representative of the whole city, but it does show that there are important differences between how different age groups and populations seek reliable information. We recommend that the city, instead of cutting the communication budget and eliminating the waste calendars, put more effort and budget into communication and education. This should include more electronic communications, more opportunities for residents in education, or for residents to ask questions, and most importantly, evaluation of which tools work for which audiences. In our work with high-rise buildings, we've seen that the highest performing buildings use a range of communication methods, and that having trained residents, 3Rs ambassadors who are resident experts on waste and recycling, is incredibly valuable in buildings. That email bulletins and regular events where residents can ask questions is very valuable, and the buildings that perform the best use a range of tools. We encourage the city to expand the use of multiple communication tools, not to limit them. I'm sorry, I don't have a timer. How much time do I have left?
We forgot to put it on. You have about a minute left. Hopefully you can do it in a minute.
Thank you. Yeah, sure. So that's my main point. I also just wanted to say that in other ways, for considering how important waste and reducing waste is towards moving Toronto towards zero waste, and how helpful that will be to creating a circular economy and a low carbon economy, we urge Toronto Council to include other metrics to express and measure solid waste success. Aside from the waste diversion rate, which is limited in terms of what it tells the public, there are many other metrics that the city can share with customers, and we think that this will really help more people understand the importance of reducing waste. As soon as 2023, the city will no longer be managing recyclables, so diversion rates will be even harder to calculate. So we encourage you to look at some of the annual reporting metrics that were approved by Council in the long-term waste strategy in 2016, And that included things such as garbage per capita, organics per capita, and percentage change in those amounts, and then also the percentage of recyclable and material and organic waste that's ending up in the garbage. These numbers give a better picture of how well the city is doing on reducing waste and on sorting waste. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. Do we have any questions of this deputant? Great. Thank you very much, Emily. I appreciate your time with us. Members, there's no other deputations on this, so I'm going to suggest if we could maybe we'll just jump around a little bit, if that's okay. We'll continue on this item and go to questions of staff, if that works with everybody. And then we'll go back. We'll do the deputation parts, and then we'll go back to 19.1. So questions of staff on BU 19.2. Councillor Carroll? Go ahead.
Yes, I have some questions of my own, but I'll start with questions regarding the deputant's comments first. I'm wondering what research was done in the process of determining that we could go online with the waste calendar. Was some research done about how many hits we've been getting since putting that recycling tool, etc.? And was any market research done so that we know what the impact would be on seniors and such?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, there was extensive work done in terms of overall outcomes of the program, and the overall intent of our outcomes is to increase the amount of material moving into the proper streams. And from that outcome, we need to look at the allocation of funding to get to that outcome. And it's not necessarily more printed material in the marketplace. It's making sure that that information is being relayed in a way that residents can have it in an accessible way, but accessibility is more than just a paper copy. So we're looking at expanding our online presence, and we have the Toronto Waste app where millions of hits take place every year, where residents look up particular items where they go, and we're looking to adjust those outcomes to ensure that less material goes into the wrong place, and that's the overall outcome. So was there specific research done on individual demographics on what tools the best? There has been some research in terms of getting that information out and different methods and modes of that information. The calendar is a once a year production that's static, and what we believe looking at increasing the outcomes of moving waste into the proper streams is that an online iterative portal with that information being accessible in multiple languages at any point in time will assist residents in diverting more material to the proper streams. The other piece that we need to make certain is that we still will have the outreach and those components in place. Actually, we're looking to bolster those deliverables and services. We've created a new group within solid waste that's specifically focused on stakeholder outreach and communication. So we have a lot of information to push out.
Okay, I got to move on to the other ones. I'm not sure that we're not going to get a blowback because I haven't heard what we've looked into for seniors. But I got to move on because I've only got 5 minutes. So in the balancing actions, I'm looking at the budget note now. In the balancing actions, when I get to Appendix 3, it really only shows the Environment Day change, but you have actually achieved the savings you need to try and absorb some of the impacts, and the impacts of not doing the rate increase and the impacts during the outbreak. But there isn't really a lot of detail beyond the Environment Day change, which looks like it's only about $154,000 in savings. So I'm wondering if you could detail a little bit further the Environment Day change. Is it Environment Day plus calendar plus some other things? Are there staff still out on emergency leave? What's the full detail on the savings?
So the savings, again, are generated through some of the voluntary separation programs that have been moved forward by the city. Also, we're looking at strategically evaluating each position a little bit more scrutinous when they're going through the hiring process in order to ensure that we can drive some savings from those positions as well, all making sure that our overall deliverables in terms of meeting our outcomes and collecting the material at the curb almost 100% of the time. Right now, our rate is around 99.6% completion rate. And so the other efficiencies are due to contract renegotiations and additional kind of contract measures that are being put in place to reduce costs, as well as looking at doing some programs in a different manner. So some of the savings and just a small portion of it is derived from looking at the delivery of our parks litter bin collection and seeing how we can provide a higher level of service for the materials that are being collected, and balancing the amount of resources required to do that, all with the outcome of making sure that there's less litter in our parks and open spaces, and making sure that residents have the proper bins to sort as required.
Thank you,
Okay,
Matt.
and if I've got time for, do I have time for one more, Mr. Chair?
Sneak a real quick one in. Yeah.
Oh, okay. It's just about the rate increase itself. We're going down to 1.5, but you say in the budget note that may be a problem down the line because we're counting on the provincial change to EPR coming in on schedule. If we were to match last year's increase instead of reducing the rate increase, would we be in a better position to absorb the province getting behind schedule on EPR?
So through you, Mr. Chair, the councillor, last year we anticipated to come in to council with a 2.7% rate increase, and we're bringing a 1.5%. And we believe, just based on our ability to deliver the program, 1.5% is sufficient in the long term for what we're delivering. The challenge that we have is, even with before COVID, we had that big question mark of when the province would be implementing extended producer responsibility and those impacts. It's still there today, and right now we're looking through the draft regulations. And as of this point, Toronto was one of the first municipalities that will be looking to transition in, and from that transition, it's anticipated that the program will generate around $15 to $20 million in efficiencies or reduction of cost because of EPR. If that does not come in, then we would be back to council with an additional request for a rate increase, and that would be consistent with pre-COVID measures as well.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor.
Those are my questions, Mr.
Great. Any other questions? Councillor McKelvey, and then Councillor Leighton after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is about the calendar, and I realize you're proposing to not do the printed calendar, but I still have many seniors that don't have access to computers, but, if there was something that could be printed by, one of their kids or by us or dropped off or something, will there be, instead of it just being an app, will there be something that will be in an easily printable format that could be shared with them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely, Councillor. That's the plan.
Okay. And my other question is the pilot project for increasing waste collection in parks and open spaces. Can you just maybe speak to how much of an investment is this? And then are you making additional investments in litter cleanup in parks for next year as well? Because I think we saw through the spring that that's something that's necessary. So can you just maybe talk to the funds needed for those things?
Sure, Councillor. So just in terms of the staffing required in parks and litter operations, in our manual cleaning on the streets and roads and with the Astral bins, we're around 200 staff. And then when we look at the number of staff in our parks, we're at 60 full-time equivalent employees, which is not necessarily just 60 bodies, because they're spread over in the summer, where we might have upwards of 80 to 100 folks actually working. The pilot project is to look at the contamination rate. So we've known for a number of years that there's minimal to no recycling really taking place in the parks. And what is a better way to ensure that the outcome of a clean park is met? And as we all know, there was a lot of litter and a lot more waste being generated in the parks this summer, just with increased activity. And one of the things that we're looking at doing is reducing the number of blue bins in the parkettes and parks, making sure that there isn't a suitable amount of blue bins, but maybe not as much as that out there right now. and instead replacing those with black bins and with green bins, so that there could be maybe enhanced organics diversion, but also so that there's more garbage bins throughout parks, so that there's less litter and the materials don't make their way into the natural environment. So we will look at a number of parks throughout the city and test this out and see if this hypothesis rings true, if there's an adjustment to the blue bins, adjustment to the green bins and black bins, if there will be less litter, as well as more materials being captured in the proper stream. So that's where our focus is on. In terms of staffing and making sure we have the folks and the resources needed to clean the parks, it kind of goes hand in hand with the pilot project that we're looking at implementing. But we are working very closely with our colleagues in Parks and Recreation to ensure that we continue to maintain those facilities at the highest standard.
And then the last related to that, there were a lot of residents that were telling me, like, can we improve communications on this don't litter thing? I think we all remember growing up, like, give a hoot, don't pollute, and all the different efforts that were put into anti-littering. And it was certainly very common to see those sorts of communications. Like, is there anything being done around communications for this issue, and including like the issues with the blue box in parks and things like that as well? But just comms about, cleaning up after yourself.
Yeah, so this year we've worked fairly closely with Parks and Recreation, Parks, Forestry and Recreation, to put out advertisements and posters and communication material in the parks. We anticipate that will happen again this year as well, just to ensure that residents put materials where they're supposed to be disposed of properly.
Thank you. Councillor Layton, next.
Yes, thank you. Can we talk about the organics processing facility? There's one slated to be commissioned in 2028. Is there any possibility of accelerating that timeframe?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, that date right now has actually been accelerated by almost close to a decade. In the original waste strategy, we were looking to have that facility built in the mid to late 2030s, and just with the market conditions and the growing demand for organics, we needed to move that up. 2028 is still, for a facility of that size and the complex nature, still honestly a quite aggressive target. I don't believe we'll be able to move that up substantially. Right now, we're in the process of identifying potential sites for that facility within the city, as well as perhaps regional partnerships to look at how we can reduce the overall capital cost. But 2028 right now is an aggressive target, and we're looking to do our best to meet that target.
So when did the target change? Because we've been having this conversation at Budget Committee with Emily Alfred from T since well before you came on board, Matt. So I'm just curious about when was it that target date change happened?
So that target date changed. I believe it was last year, if not the year before. So when I was brought on board with the city, looking at the long-term waste management strategy, it was slated to be developed in the late 2030s. And again, looking at our capacity, the market risk, and the growing demand for those materials, we brought that forward in the budget process to advance the capital up by close to a decade. So again, on that date, we're cautiously optimistic, but we're pushing ourselves to as best we can to hit that date.
Now, when you look at what the projected amounts of organic material we'll have to process by, say, 2030, will we have enough capacity to process that much if we have this additional facility, or are we still short?
We will have enough. So right now, the city generates around 170,000 tons of organic material. And within our current processing environment, we have 130,000 tons. So we're short around 40 to 50,000 tons any given year. This facility is looking to be between 100 and around 100,000 tons of capacity. So we will definitely have enough room for now and a number of years within our planning scope. But again, it's making sure that the facilities are able to be built iteratively, and we can expand on them as we have with Dufferin, and ensure that we can continue to manage those materials within the city and generate those benefits.
So we're also hoping to increase the amount that we have coming in, correct? Of organics coming in.
So yes, yes, absolutely. We're looking to increase the amount of organics that's currently being generated, and we know with the growth in the city, more organics will be generated, and we're looking to capture those as well.
My one last line of questioning is around the toxic taxi, because I know that with changes to the environment days, and for people that don't have cars, and I know for many on the call that might be the case, for others maybe not, where you don't have a car to lug your 12 paint cans or whatever down to your local depot or environment day. What's the city doing to expand that program?
So
Are we promoting it in any way that is trying to get to folks, markets that might not have vehicles?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, this year the toxic taxi is status quo. The number of vehicles and the fleet size and the folks allocated to that. We're really making sure that we have a good balance in terms of reaching our outcomes of diverting that material. And part of that is making sure that we have that accessibility through the toxic taxi, but also promoting our transfer stations and those facilities. This year, we saw great success with the transfer station environment days, and we're looking to really highlight that really any day can be an E-day at our transfer stations in terms of dropping those materials.
If I could indulge one more question about the total amounts of toxic and special and hazardous waste that were collected this year compared to other years, do you have a sense of how we did this year compared to last year, the year before?
Councillor, I'd have to get back to you on that specific. I just have to dig through some information to get it for you.
Okay.
I can provide no problem.
I won't ask for a briefing note about that. If you can have that information available for council, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Any other councillors for questions? Councillor Nunziata.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna ask you a question about the calendars. In the high-rise buildings, so will we be sending out communication to property management of all the buildings so they can post up on each floor? Like, are we going to be doing that, communicating at least the tenants in these buildings will get that information?
So through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, that will be part of the outreach program this year through our stakeholder and outreach group, making sure that our 3 R's ambassador program gets the information out, gets stickers, gets signs as best as we can within the current environment that we're at.
So we can ask management to post them up in these buildings.
We can ask them to post them up. We're more than happy to send them files and any information that they need, and provide staff, the ability to reach out to those buildings and train or coach or anything we need to do to help move the needle.
So just a question on the garbage receptacles that we have on the streets. Have we changed as the amount of time, the number of times that they're collected, that they're emptied? Like, has that been changed at all as far as the schedule?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the councillor, no, we keep a fairly robust schedule. Now, that being said, there are some areas within the city that just due to the existing circumstances, there's less material. So we monitor those and reallocate as required. But our service standards are extremely high, especially in the BIA areas and around parks and open spaces to make sure that we collect those materials so that they don't become litter.
So in some BIA areas that they're overflowing daily because people are dropping off their house garbage next to the bins. So we're going to focus in those areas that they're collected more often, because that's a real issue in my ward. So if the BIAs are requesting for additional pickup, we'll be able to do that in those problem areas?
So if there's any issues with illegal dumping, we will work with MLS to make sure that that's addressed. When it comes to the litter bins and the garbage bins in the right-of-way, We have a very aggressive schedule on collecting those, especially in the BIAs, and we'll maintain that. But when it comes to the illegal dumping piece, that's over and above our normal service standard when we collect those materials. But we'll make sure that it's managed in the most appropriate way for sure.
At the request of the BIAs, correct?
We will work with them to make sure that there's no garbage strewn around the streets.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none. Actually, just a couple of questions, Matt. And just more confirming some of the questions that have been answered. So you would have, under normal circumstances, come to us with a 2.7% increase. That's correct? This year, we're doing 1.5%.
That's correct, Councillor.
Okay, so you in recognizing the challenges that we've been facing this year, you brought the 1.5. Now, I just want to make sure that if we support this 1.5, that your impact or the capital contributions over your 10-year plan, this 1.5 will not impact that plan. Now, recognizing next year is different, you'll have to go up, I believe, is it 2.7 or 3% over an extended period of time?
Mr. Chair, it's 1.5% increase this year, and then for the next 9 years of our plan, it would be 3% a year.
Okay, so it's 3%.
In order to maintain capital. Yeah.
Okay, but you'll be able, with 1.5, we'll be able to achieve that plan moving forward with 3% for the next time.
Yes, Councillor, that's correct.
Okay, great. That's all my questions. Speaking to the item. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not going to move any motions because I know that people are happy with the lower rate increase, but I'm very, very concerned about it. I think that first of all, I think reducing the rate this year is not necessarily going to help us, given that the impact that our taxpayers and ratepayers are going to face over time is going to endure for a number of years. And I worry that the adjustments they start to see from other orders of government when they begin to try and reduce the debt that they're incurring right now means that our taxpayers are actually going to be struggling even more in future years than they are this year. And so I'm a little worried about that. But I know that adjustments have been made. The fact that some of the adjustments have been made through contract negotiations with our various private contractors is nice to see, because ordinarily we only look within for those savings. So if our private contractors have been a part of the savings, that's great. But I want to mention my frustration with the budget note, as I know that the CFO is on with us today as well. I'm frustrated by whatever are the criteria for Appendix 3, looking at service changes. It really doesn't reflect the things we're discussing today. It only talks about the Environment Day change. It doesn't, I believe it's a service change to say we're no longer going to produce the waste calendar. Any kinds of changes that may be taking place inside the workforce, in the transfer stations or wherever, if those are happening, I think those should be in service changes because they're part of the service of solid waste. The fact that they're not there is concerning. You have to hunt and peck through the budget to find those. And so I think we need to look at the criteria of that appendix in all of our budget notes. And lastly, Mr. Chair, I wanted to comment that I remain concerned, and I know I raise this every year, at the approach to education. I have no way to go to the overhead projector in the committee room as I normally do. So I simply tweeted it out this morning. When you go to other cities, you still see massive visual education talking to people about how to reduce their waste. And we seem to be moving away from that. We're not going to produce the calendar anymore. We're going to, rather than educate people on when you're walking into a park with lots of plastic water bottles and lots of pop cans, they should be going in the blue bin. And since they're not, we're just going to reduce the number of blue bins. That's not education. And as our deputant said, and as many other organizations will tell you, we're only going to reduce with education. And I'm especially troubled that we seem to be retreating from education to balance the books at the very time we need to increase it, we're facing a big decision in the long-term waste strategy. If we have to move from landfilling to any kind of energy from waste processing, any kind of thermal processing, that's only going to be affordable if we have reduced the amount of volume that needs to go into it as much as humanly possible. So we should actually be enhancing education and in getting that reduction piece as best we can before we get to that big decision. Because I'll say it again, whether you're landfilling it or you're burning it, it's expensive. And if we don't do the reduction pieces and the education that you need to do to result in that, there's no savings down the road. There's only cost. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers to the item? Councillor Layton.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair or Budget Chief. I have a couple of briefing note requests to pass on to executive.
Sure.
If the clerk could display them. Yeah. One that just some background on the evidence to support reducing the education budget, discontinuing the use of the waste calendar, including a distinction between demographic groups in Toronto. And second, and it sounds like this may be a really quick answer to them because they will be producing something that we could technically send to people, perhaps. That's the cost of partial production of a waste calendar to be provided to specific demographics that might benefit from the material. And we'll see if executive committee think that's useful. I would add, I reluctantly support the reduction in the fees this year, simply because of the position that I think many households are in as a result of the epidemic. But we can't lose sight of the fact that I think the water budget is a great example of the commitment that was made to first 5 over 5 and then 3 over whatever. To being the pathway to addressing our state of good repair. Solid waste is no different. When we don't want to be 10 years down the road with a change in how we're going to, in a long-term basis, address our solid waste concerns and issues, particularly with the residual trash. We don't want to be in a position where we haven't funded those accounts. I certainly don't want to leave the council of 2030 with a giant bill and no reserves to pay it off. I'd rather leave them in a good place. It's very easy for us to say, no, let's not fund that reserve. Don't worry about it. It'll we'll let the next people pick up the tab. Let's not do that. Let's be the responsible caretakers that we should be, and in fact do things like what we've heard, and that's advance the new organic processing facility. So that before that 2030 council gets inaugurated, they already have dealt with the issues of addressing the additional pressure of organics that are hopefully going to be entering the stream, because that's what we want to do. We want to divert from landfill. So kudos to staff for advancing that. Thank you to the Toronto Environmental Alliance and other folks who were advocating the advancement of that capital facility. I'll support of this reduction in the anticipated fee at this stage, but I think we're gonna have to stick to it, despite the fact that it's difficult to put increases on fees. We're gonna have to stick to it in future years.
Thanks, Councillor. Anybody else to speak? Okay, I'll speak quickly. First of all, Matt and all the staff and your entire team, I want to thank you for the incredible work that you've been doing under challenging circumstances. And I think this will be a theme that we're going to be seeing, as this is the first budget we're looking at as we go to water. Toronto, well, everything actually after that, is the theme of how do we manage in a very, very challenging year. And I think Matt and his team are a good example of the work that has been happening from their perspective. They have come to us with a 1.5% increase, recognizing that it should have been 2.7. But they've done a lot of good work to recognize, number one, they want to keep the standards, the service standards, very high. But at the same time, recognizing the challenges I think a lot of people in the city and otherwise are challenging, and bringing something affordable to us to approve. And again, the 1.5%, I know in some of the conversations prior to this, what would be a reasonable number. I think what was important is what can you do, what can you achieve that is affordable, but that will allow you to continue with the work that you do. And that's primarily the capital contributions, the work and the money that you put into the capital contributions over a 10-year plan to make sure that it's achievable. So I'm confident that we will be able to do that, achieve that 10-year plan, recognizing, as Matt said, that starting next year, it will have to be 3% over an extended period of time. As we did with water, as Councillor Layton was mentioning, I think we'll have to stick to that over the next number of years. It'll be difficult, but I think it'll be achievable. So again, Matt, I just want to thank you and your entire team, the work that you've been doing. Of course, I'll be supporting the 1.5%. And as I said, there'll be a theme as we're going through this entire budget about trying to keep things affordable. This is the first step in doing that. Water after this will be similar. And again, acknowledging the incredible work that staff have done. So thank you. So why don't we go now to the two motions, or the one motion from Councillor Layton, briefing note request. If we can get that up on the screen. Here we go. Moved by Councillor Layton. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. On the item, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Great. Okay, we'll go now to a BU.
Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, Councillor.
Mr. Chair, just before you get going, just so that we're not leaving a subset of staff waiting around, the item 10, the reserve balances, I finished reading the piece I needed to, so I could release that.
Okay, which item was that, Councillor, again?
10, the last item.
Oh, 10, okay. Anybody else want to hold the obligatory reserve funds? Everybody else okay with releasing that? Okay. So on number 10, BU 19.10, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Great. Okay, so...
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'm prepared to release BU 19.6 and BU 19.7. After a flurry from emails from various departments asking if I have questions, I'll release them, but may have some questions along the way to council.
Okay, so you're going to release BU 19.6, the capital variance report, and BU 19.7? Perfect. Okay.
Yes, I'll release them both.
Okay, so 19.6 capital variance for the 12 months ending December 31st. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 19.7, the operating variance report, year ending December 31st, 2019. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Great. Thanks, Councillor. Okay, so why don't we have one more item that has a deputant, BU 19.3, 2021 rate-supported budgets, Toronto Parking Authority. I believe we have Michael Poliani from the Toronto Environmental Alliance who is here to speak. Welcome, Michael, and you will have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thanks for this opportunity to speak with you today. Just wanted to start by really thanking City Council and staff at the Toronto Parking Authority for the amazing efforts to expand the bike share program during the pandemic and in the recent couple of years. I think it's just a testimony to how fast the city staff has really responded to a huge need for safe and affordable and convenient mobility options. And so an amazing success. And I think I read in the documents that there were 2.5 million rides in the past year. So kudos for that. And I think from Toronto Environmental Alliance's perspective, we want to just make a couple of points about this budget, raise a couple of concerns. And the first concern really is related to bike share and the continued expansion of bike share. And there's a concern that this budget doesn't do enough, I think, to recognize and support the continued expansion of bike share. And so I'll just make a couple of points on that. It's mentioned in the budget documents that bike share is projected to grow ridership by 20% in 2021. But we don't see any capital investment in 2021 for expansion of bike share. or any capital investment in any of the years between 2023 and 2030 for a continued expansion. We also see a reduction in bike share staff salary spending, I believe by 21% in 2021. And also indications that there would be reduced spending for non-essential services. There's concern what this might mean for maintenance and repairs and the operation of bike share. The second point is a slightly bigger point. It relates to a concern that about the budget's emphasis on short-term thinking, on trying to get people back into their cars and also expanding parking spaces. I think that during the pandemic, we've seen fundamental changes to mobility patterns. We've seen cities around the world rethinking parking spaces and parking lots and the public space that's used for parking lots, transitioning parking lots to community gardens, mini parks, restaurant spaces, pedestrian zones, and other beneficial uses. And here in Toronto, we've seen amazing creative action around active TO, curb TO, cafe TO, all of which have been huge successes in rethinking how we use space in the city for the best benefit of residents. And yet, the Toronto Parking Authority frames these initiatives as challenges and risks because they take away parking spaces. Indeed, TPA's main goal seems to be get people back into cars and to get cars back into parking lots, rather than improving mobility, improving health, improving economic vibrancy and sustainability. So, for example, TPA calls for a parking rate freeze to lure drivers back. It talks about purchasing additional parking spaces. It talks about investing $157 million on parking facility expansion over the next 10 years, but only $1 million on expanding bike share. So many of Council's reports and motions, from Transform TO to the recent TOR report to the Climate Emergency Declaration, talk about the need to apply a climate lens to all city spending and decisions to make sure they align with building a resilient, equitable, zero-carbon city. So it's fairly shocking to see not a single reference to climate change in the TPA budget materials. There is some mention of greening initiatives, but it's unclear what proportion of spending is allocated to them or what they are. There's a new book out. It's called The Good Ancestor by Roman Kusnarek. And he talks about the tyranny of short-term thinking in many of today's institutions and the urgent need to embrace longer-term thinking if we are to leave future generations a livable planet. So I conclude by urging Council to direct the Toronto Parking Authority to think beyond the short term, to think beyond luring drivers back into parking spaces, and start to think hard about how to better use the city's vast parking real estate to advance Toronto's commitment to building a healthy, resilient, and equitable city for today's residents and tomorrow's residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Are there questions of the deputant? Seeing none. So why don't we go, that was the last deputant, why don't we go to questions of staff on this item? Anybody have questions of staff? Seeing, Councillor Nunziata, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification as far as the increase for penalties from $30 to $75 for vehicles parked at municipal parking facilities in violation. So can you explain that? That the fines are going to be $75 now? Is that what it is? Rather than 30? Can you hear me?
Good morning. Jeff, would you please speak to the PVN increase?
Thank you, Robin. Through the chair to the councillor, TPA is proposing to amend the City of Toronto Municipal Code to increase the maximum PVN amount that may be issued to offending vehicles parked at off-street parking facilities. And that proposed increase is from $30 to $75. The increased amount is needed to promote compliance at our off-street parking lots. Car parks where TPA has removed the daily maximum rate, and there's 32 of these specific car parks or particular turn. At these locations, the equivalent rate to park for an 8-hour period exceeds, and in some cases quite significantly, the current $30 penalty amount. To verify the extent of the issues, we went out and did some surveys and found that only 64% of those were actually paying for parking at these locations. So the proposed new amount is something that we're recommending to drive compliance. The new penalty amounts that are being recommended are also comparable with parking-related infractions that are imposed by other municipalities throughout Canada. And if approved, we'll work to get the new penalty amount in place as early as possible in 2021. But again, this is about compliance. It's not about generating revenue.
Right. So are we going to increase enforcement in these lots as well for people that are not paying at all?
The hope, Councillor, is that through the increased penalty amount, that will drive the compliance. I'd maybe ask Robin to speak plan for bringing back enforcement staff, or for looking at how these locations are enforced, rather.
Yeah. So you know what parking lot I'm talking about, that only 10% of the people are paying in these lots? You know which one I'm referring to, right, Jeff?
This is the one up at Weston and Lawrence, Councillor?
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're done reviewing that location to ensure that the enforcement levels are appropriate for the demands that are in place there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Those are actually going to be my questions.
Yes.
Oh, Councillor Leighton.
My apologies. I didn't realize I had my video off. I was waving, but I should have realized that. If I could ask staff, it came up in the deputation, the bike share staffing salaries are down significantly going into 2021. Given the ridership is increasing, why are we spending less? How do we justify that?
Through the chair, maintenance and operations is all conducted through a contract with Shift Transit. In 2021, as we don't have an expansion, we won't require any additional support through the summer months for that expansion. So that decrease is a reflection of the capital activity projects.
And the other line item that was referred to about the non-essential reduction, is that captured in that as well?
I'm sorry, I'm not clear on what the non-essential reduction.
There was also a reference to a non-essential services reduction across both bike share and other services. Is that not correct?
We have reviewed our budget to ensure that we're delivering on critical path essential projects. That's your question. Our staffing is in alignment for all of our critical path projects.
Okay, I'll have to get some clarity from that in between now and council then. This greening initiative that you have for parking lots, that's the permeable pavers, some plantings. I don't mean to simplify, but it's probably way more complex than that. But essentially, that's it, right?
That is correct.
Now, you have 50 million in the budget for various structural and greening initiatives from 2021 to 2030. What proportion of that is actually greening stuff?
I'm sorry, I don't have that handy. I'll have to provide that to you after this call.
Okay. I think that's it from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, if anybody wants to speak to the item? Councillor Layton?
I have a briefing note request. I'm not sure staff clerks have had time to write up yet.
Yeah, I think they do have it, so we'll.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Oh, they just sent back the approval of final wording. If you want to put it up on the screen.
It's coming.
Look at that. And they fixed all the prefixes for people's titles. Just minutes. Way to go. That the request the acting president, Toronto Parking Authority, and the director, Office of Energy and Environment, to submit a briefing note to December 10th, 2020 meeting of Executive Council on what could be done as part of the 2021 Toronto Parking Authority budget to help achieve climate change targets, including expanding bike share and cycling facilities at TPA lots, greening initiatives, enhancing stormwater management, and electric vehicle charging facility capacity at Toronto Parking Authority lots. That's the question I forgot to ask, was how many EV stations are at TPA lots? And I can tell you, I don't think it's many. And that's a shame, because a lot of other jurisdictions are looking to those lots as potential sites for a significant electric vehicle charging facilities, because they're all over the city, and because we can make that investment. We can see that investment amortize over time. But let me take a step back. You know, we made a commitment to net zero by 2050. We have divisions that can help influence that. Transportation, fleet, solid waste management. The Toronto Parking Authority is entirely under our control and a major contributor to one aspect, one piece of that GHG pie that we need to change. A pretty major piece. Look, and I'm not saying we should be selling off all this land to plant trees, because as we shift over, things like EV will need infrastructure. Not everyone can charge an EV at their home. Not everyone wants to pave over their front yard to put an EV in. There are many jurisdictions around the world that are actually trying to put them centrally in lots so that people charge their EVs while they're out shopping. They charge them while they're at work. And the reality is, we are the agent of that change. We are going to have to be a major agent. We went ahead and did a whole EV strategy. And if we're not starting to ensure achieving that strategy, achieving our Transform TO goals are embedded in every single budget. If we're not doing that, we're not doing our job, and we're not living up to the commitments that we made both to the residents of the City of Toronto and internationally in the accords that we sign with other cities to achieve those reductions. So I think that it perhaps is that some of our divisions aren't fully realizing and aligning with the climate goals of the city, and these things take time. I'm not faulting anyone for it, but it's time we start doing that realignment now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Layton. Anyone else to speak? Seeing none, I do have a motion that I have to move. It's BU 19.3, where Councillor Nunziata's questions came from. It's on the screen. The City Council increased the penalty amount from $30 to $75 for the offences in the below sections. And the City Council amend City of Toronto Municipal Code Chapter 610 Penalties Administration as set out in Attachment 2. So begin with that. That's, again, just outlining those changes. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Yes, this was on the BU 19.3. Yeah. Now we'll do the overall item, 19.3. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, I believe the last item now, because we've released all the other ones, is BU 19.1 2021 rate supported budget for water, wastewater consumption rates and service fees.
Mr. Chair, on a point of personal privilege and just an observation, that oftentimes it's certain councillors of a certain political persuasion or a certain geographic area are referred to as those fighting the so-called war on the car. The budget chief from Scarborough just doubled the parking fine. So thank you for joining our team, comrade.
I have to unmute for my laughing for that.
You see my big smile, Mike. It's all good. So 19.1, water and wastewater consumption rates. Do we have questions of staff? And I believe Councillor Layton was holding that. So do you have questions, Councillor, on the water budget?
Yes, thank you very much. Just really quickly, remind me why there was a delay in the stormwater charge consultation, and just if we could have some clarity on when we will expect to see it.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. There was a delay because originally we had anticipated going out in the spring to do public consultation. Just as we were scheduling all the meetings, all the lockdowns happened, the first lockdown with COVID, so we had to postpone all of our plans for public consultation. During the summertime, working with our public consultation unit, we were able to devise a strategy to do it virtually. So we restarted the consultation. We've had one session. There's another one coming up December 4th. We will likely have some more in the new year, and we will be coming back with a report in the spring of 2021.
Great. If I could ask, there's a projected stormwater management expenditure increase, correct?
Yes, and primarily on the capital component. So if you look at Toronto Water's capital program, there's significant growth in the stormwater category over the 10-year period. And so that's really what's driving the increase in costs. There are increasing costs on the operating side. Percentage-wise, they are increasing at a larger percentage than other costs as we take on more assets, stormwater assets. As we build them, we have to maintain and operate. So that cost is going up. But it's very, very small in comparison to drinking water and wastewater treatment costs.
Okay. The next question is, does our state of good repair reflect the long-term implications of climate change?
It has built in right now, the plan, a significant investment to deal with climate change or extreme storm events. So the budget in front of you has $2.2 billion funding the basement flooding program over 10 years and $2.1 billion funding the stormwater component, which is a combination of environmental improvements. But as we're designing them, we are looking at the impact of climate change.
Correct me if I'm wrong, the only revenue we get from another level of government is the Federal Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund?
At this point in time, yes, we've been successful on receiving funding for 2 specific projects, and that's it.
And that accounts for 0.4% of our capital budget in 2021?
For 2021, the capital budget is $1.35 billion. We are projecting to spend about $5 or $6 million of DMAF funding. If you go over 10 years, where the expenditure will occur, our capital program is $14.8 billion. Of that, about $110 million is from the DMAF funding. So you can see it's a very small percentage.
It's a tiny fraction of a fraction.
That's correct. It's
have we applied for any other sources of funding from the other level of government?
We have looked at all their programs, continue to look at all their programs. I've had several meetings with the Canada Infrastructure Bank. Unfortunately, none of those programs are significantly tailored to meet the programs that we have. A lot of times there's issues or caveats of when the work has to be done. Is the shovel ready? When are you going to complete by? There are no long-term programs in place that contemplate what we're doing, which is looking out for many, many years.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lou.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Councillor Carroll.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Lou.
Good morning.
I noticed that your budgeted position count is the same as last year, well as the year we're in right now. It stays the same, but I'm wondering what's the actual snapshot for right now? How many of the position count that we see in the overall budget are actually on. Did you have any emergency leaves during the COVID crisis?
So during COVID, no, we maintained full operation. And so we did not have to redeploy any staff. In fact, we did have to make some adjustments and have people working from home or separating to make sure they had appropriate physical distancing. We instituted shifts, for example, so we didn't have as many people in a yard or a plant location. So a number of different things that we had to put in place, but we had to keep operating. So there were no redeployment of staff. We've been running right now a vacancy rate higher than we normally do, as we were unsure what was going to happen with revenues. Particularly in March, April, and May, we saw a quick drop in consumption in certain categories of customers. So we were cautious on filling certain positions. We've got approval now to fill those essential positions, and we've been doing that. If you look at our budget, it looks the same year over year, and that's only because in year we did do a base budget adjustment very recently, and that was for transit positions. So we added in a report in September 21 positions that will be funded by Metrolinx. So there actually was an increase in staffing complement, but that is directly related to the growing Metrolinx program and our ability to dedicate resources to review those drawings.
Okay, great. And now, in terms of the impact, your budget shows us that drop in commercial consumption that happened during the first lockdown had significant impact, commercial and industrial, and now we're heading into another lockdown, a difficult time. We don't know how long it'll last. Your budget anticipates that there's a revenue hit again in 2021 in that class, in the commercial and industrial. Are you confident that going down to the 1.5 rate increase, that we're not going to end up a bit vulnerable in capital reserves?
So for the short term, so for next year, we're fine. There's sufficient funding in the reserve, as well as our projections on revenue. We did have a bit of a rebound in revenue this year with the hot summer. So that offset some of the impact of the softening in some of our commercial classes. We've done a deeper dive now of our ICI accounts, our industrial, commercial, and institutional accounts. And what we found is, yes, overall there was a reduction. However, there were some that went up. So there are some sectors where they were busier and used more water. But overall, there was a decrease in that sector. We do suspect that it won't be as sharp a decline as we saw in March and April, and that's primarily because a lot of the schools are open now, as opposed to everything shut down. There's the institutional sector, for example, shut down significantly in March and April because everything was closed. Now you have partial closures, so there is a softening there, but we suspect that some of that is made up with residential use. Residential consumption was slightly higher, as well as York Region took more water from us as they had their residential consumption go up. So we've put forward a conservative estimate for next year. We do have the ability to readjust if we're seeing concerns with revenues next year also staying soft. We have factored in that, some of it. But if it really impacts the revenues, we'll have to make adjustments again in some of our categories. We'll look again at our costs. Remember, if we use less water, we do save some money on our operating, and that's where we took some savings on chemicals and hydro this year. But primarily, it will impact capital, and right now we've been able to preserve that with the 1.5% increase.
Okay, I just have one other question, Mr. Chair, and it's about a more down to the level of homes. We set a target in service levels for being able to go out and check all the catch basins ourselves to make sure that they're clear, and that as we get into the big thaw at the end of winter, we don't see as much basement flooding. How is that target coming? I know it had a very slow start.
Yeah, it had a slow start. We've been rejigging some of the technologies and the contracts that we're using to do the catch basin work. if I categorize them into several quick buckets. So sewer, we've been using new technology to check for sewer blockages. That's been working well. And instead of flushing all sewers all the time, we use acoustic technology to only flush those ones that need it. So that saves us time and money. Catch basin cleanings, we've had some contractor issues, and we've readjusted our contracts in this past year. So we should get that back on to meeting our target levels. And finally, the resets. So we've been doing the utility cuts. So remember the permanent restoration of utility cuts? Toronto Water took that over about a year and a half ago. And we've been doing that as well as the catch basin resets. So that just the re-leveling. So those contracts have actually been working quite well. Took us a while to ramp up. But this year we've been meeting and in certain cases exceeding some of our targets. So we're quite happy with the way those programs are going. So the catch basin cleanings is the one that we're still really focused on. We're hoping that the readjustments to our contracts will show significant improvement next year.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions on the water budget? Seeing none, we'll go to speakers. Councillor Layton, then Councillor Carroll.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't have any briefing note requests for Lou on this one. I thank you very much for again your work bringing forward a capital budget that shows a commitment to decreasing the state of good repair, despite the fact that it means increasing costs. I will support the proposed 1.5, but again, I don't need to reiterate myself about the importance of us sticking to what's necessary, not what is easy. And I know that that council has been very strong on this before, as of many of you on council, and kudos to that. My one concern in this is that the costs of climate change are captured within that capital budget, because the work that is being done locally or globally to fight climate change to the degree necessary to hope that the status quo is good enough, because it won't be, because there will be changes in our severe weather, there will be changes in water levels and use. These are all things that we need to keep in mind as we're planning out this budget over the long term, because it's work that's going to need to be done, and some of it's very, very expensive work. So we got to make sure that Lou's got the resources to pull this off, because it is incredibly important that through the management of water is going to be incredibly important in the decades to come, both for the protection of property and the protection of key pieces of infrastructure, but also in the protection of life. So I would urge us to keep that in mind when we're doing our projections, and hopefully the new transform TO recommendations that come out are reflective of that and give us modeling that can be useful to Toronto Water in ensuring that we're making the necessary investments. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Carroll, I believe you're next.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I share Councillor Layton's sentiments. I'm going to support the 1.5 because I know it's what people want, but I continue to caution, and it'll certainly come into play when we get into the main city budgets. I really caution. We all want to do what we can right now to help people keep their costs down, but I worry about the long run. I worry that we're going to get into a situation where we really have to put in some unpalatable increases later on to catch up at the very time when similar recovery measures, debt reduction measures, etc., will be going on for our ratepayers and property taxpayers in the federal and provincial government, who are now incurring record levels of debt to get us through this crisis. And so I worry that the onus falls to us to do the smoothing of our costs. And so this dip this year is one thing, but I hope that if the commercial dip in revenue continues, that as we look to our budgets in a sort of multi-year context, that we're all realizing that as we adopt 1.5 right now, we're signing on that we may have to take some very grown-up moves right in 2022. election year, et cetera, if we're looking at this dip in revenue again, God forbid this lockout should extend into 2021. But if it does, we really need to smooth out how we deal with our rates, because we've got to anticipate that things are going to get a little more expensive on the federal and provincial side in terms of what's asked of our residents. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other people wishing to speak? I will speak quickly myself then. Again, just want to thank the entire water staff, Lou, your entire team, year after year, come to us with amazing numbers. Again, this is another example in a year of challenging times coming together to us with a number of numbers, bringing down, as you said, to 1.5%. Of course, I'll be supporting that. And recognizing in a challenging time that you have done what you need to do. And thank you for that. I mean, whether, through efficiencies, I'm glad you mentioned the fact that there were no layoffs, cost mitigation measures, savings, with consumption, all that. Recognizing that you did your part, and we need to look at keeping every budget as affordable as possible this year, and we're so far doing that. But at the same time, preserving the capital program. And the questions that I had asked prior to this meeting is can you bring a 1.5 but preserve the capital program, preserve the work that you have been doing over time, and you can. So I'm comfortable with that. I don't necessarily have the same concerns as we move forward in years that we may have to look at cost increases. I'm quite confident and comfortable that, yes, it is a 1.5 for this year, but after that, there'll be those 3% ongoing. We'll be able to maintain the levels that we have been doing. So on that, again, I just want to, thank Lou and your entire team. Amazing work. It's a big budget that we're approving very quickly in some respects, but it's an important budget. And again, the work and the confidence that we all have here with you collectively, I think is really important. So again, thank you for the work that you do. Okay, I believe we're just doing the item. Okay, so all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Great, we actually do have one other. I thought this was the last item, but I was just mentioned. We do have 19.4, the municipal land transfer tax rebate for first-time home buyers. Councillor Bradford, you actually held that. Did you have questions of staff?
No questions, Mr. Chair. Just a quick motion.
Sorry?
Quick motion.
Oh, okay.
To
okay.
speak. But
okay. So maybe again, not knowing what the motion is, I just a question to staff. Can you just give us an overview of what this is all about? We are receiving it, but can you just give us an overview of what this report brings to us, just for general knowledge?
For you, Mr. Chair. So I'll give you an overview. Andrew Flynn is also on the line, and I'm sure he'll jump in if I miss something. But a simple overview would be currently the city offers an MLTT, a municipal land transfer tax rebate, and the report is contemplating increasing the threshold to which the rebate is currently offered at $400,000. What the report is also saying is that if we were to consider increasing the threshold for the rebate, we may also want to consider, in actual fact, capping the value of a property for the first-time homeowner at an arbitrary value. So I'm not going to put in a capped value, but this is saying if you qualify for the rebate, do all properties qualify, or should the value of the property be capped at a specific value? So these are the items that are being considered at the present time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Bradford, I believe you are to speak.
Yep, thanks very much, Mr. Chair. And I have a motion, if we could put that on the screen. It is requesting our CFO and treasurer to report on updates to the rebates for the first-time homebuyers as part of the 2022 budget process. I think that COVID continues to impact the housing market here. We're starting to see what that looks like. But overall, the standing of our housing market for Torontonians, how that has changed since this policy first came into effect. I think we're likely to see more changes over the next year. So I'd like to have our staff and our CFO take a look at that in the context of 2022. I'd like to thank Heather and her team for bringing forward the data on this item. This was a request that we had made earlier in the year, and it's great to see it come back here to budget. I'm a big proponent of the first-time home buyers rebate. I think that's a great policy. But in order for it to continue to be helpful, in order for it to continue to be relevant, I think we need to look at the details of those thresholds and make sure it reflects the real estate market that we're living in today. As our CFO alluded to, there's also work to be done with respect to potentially looking at a cap on that as well. So really going back to the intent and the essence of the policy and making sure that we keep it up to date with the Toronto real estate market, making sure that we're providing that affordability for first-time buyers, but doing it in a sensitive way that looks at the market prices and also considers, the idea of first-time home and what exactly we're trying to provide that relief for. So that's the motion, and would appreciate your support.
Thank you very much.
Chair, can I ask a question, or I might be answered by just seeing the motion again? It wasn't on the screen for too long. Oh, okay. So I just have a quick question of the mover. I'm just wondering if in choosing the words and any other relevant factors, when the report comes back, looking at 2022, would you be interested in looking in the raising the threshold, also looking at a cap? Could that be something that they report on as well at the same time?
Yes, in my discussions with our CFO about this, that's certainly something that her and her team have brought forward, and she just sort of teed up in her comments there. I think that's something that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Trying to provide the affordability for first-time home buyers, but some people need that support more than others. So I think looking at a cap is a prudent and smart thing to do.
Okay. I'll just make a quick comment if you want to put me on the speakers list, Mr. Chu.
I will do that, and you are on the speakers list, so you're next.
Well, I can support this motion as long as it does contemplate looking at the cap piece as well. Everyone knows that we started out with the level that was chosen in order to easily collect along with the province. The original first-time buyer level that was chosen because it was harmonized with the province, which doesn't make a lot of sense at this point. It's a lot cheaper to buy a first-time home in Dryden than it is in Toronto, and so didn't make a lot of sense. And so looking at a new cap, I'm always interested in looking at, because the value proposition to Toronto always was, from the introduction of this revenue tool, was that we're looking at people who have sold a property in Toronto, who have made a significant capital gain, and we're asking them to invest in the city at this point in time as they move on to their enhanced home ownership, which is not the case for the first-time buyer. And getting on the property ladder is harder than ever. That being said, it's also true that we see first-time buyers buying homes now in excess of $1 million. And so we know at that point, we're looking at you either have generational wealth to help you or you're Drake. It's one or the other. And so at that point, I think it's fair to be asking to make an investment in the city at that point. And so I'm happy to look at raising the bar for the first-time buyer, as long as we're also choosing a cap, and the cap could be generous. It could be $1.5 million or on up. But I think at a certain point we have to look at that, because there are first-time buyers that arrive in this city, and the first property they buy penthouse condominium worth $3 million. And that's a person we think should invest in the city. Those are my comments. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other comments? Seeing none. So the motion by Councillor Bradford. I'll put it up quickly. All in favor? Opposed? That carried. On the item BU 19.4, all in favor? Opposed? That carries. Well, thank you. We are done. Appreciate all your time, and thank you very much to staff for all their efforts, and we will be moving all these items on to executive next. Thank you. Have a good day.
Mr. Chair.